Welcome back, Ambassador Philippe Etienne, to Washington after your recall. And I want to start there. This spat between Washington and Paris following the AUKUS deal. Has the mood music changed between these two partners, this transatlantic relationship? Is it looking more positive following especially these meetings between Secretary of State Blinken, climate czar Kerry, all visiting Paris?
Yes, indeed. Thank you for having me. After this shock which was created in my country by the announcement, without prior consultation, information of my country, we have initiated, together with the United States, and after President Biden reached out to President Macron, and they had this phone call on September 22nd, we have initiated a process, an in-depth consultation process. And there has been already a lot of meetings, very, very substantial meetings, on the basis of our common goals, to decide which concrete actions which we can together take to rebuild trust, to rebuild confidence. And not only that, we have decided, the two presidents have decided in which domains we have to take this common strategic action between the United States and France to find again a trust between two important allies.
So you're talking about a lot of lack of trust. Over the summer, Prime Minister Scott Morrison had some questions regarding the submarines. Do you think that the French, was he just not clear enough, or was there a beat that was missing? Because the French seemed to be so taken off guard when this was announced.
Well, indeed, yes. We learned about this new deal in the news, actually. But as you said in your first question, now for us the most important thing, and we recognize that the US took the initiative to reach out to us, the most important thing, together with the US, I speak here only about the French-American relationship, we decided to move. Not yet done, we have still a lot of work to do, but at least we have this process, and it must lead to a meeting between the two presidents at the end of the month in Europe, when President Biden will be again in Europe.
We also recently heard from Bruno Le Maire, and he was talking about how there is divisions between Paris and Washington on China. He said Europe wants to engage while the United States wants to confront China. Do you think that division is going to be in how they approach China inevitable, that it's going to be a divided approach between Europe and the United States?
You know, I have been ambassador to the European Union, have been ambassador to Germany, and then have been NSA before coming to Washington. My personal experience, based on the facts, is that the European Union, not only France, but France, of course, was very active in this process. The European Union has moved to take into consideration all challenges linked with the rise of Chinese power. We have defined our European policy back in 2019, and as a combination of systemic rivalry, firm competition in the fields of technology, economy, and engagement with China on global issues such as climate. Frankly, what I hear here in the US is not that different. We might have our own position because we are not exactly the same place. We have our own relations with China, but frankly, we share quite a lot of principles here, according to this definition we have given, and we are following in practice of our relations with China.
Ambassador, good morning. Guy Johnson in London. Thank you for your time today. President Macron has looked at Europe first, basically looking at a foreign policy, a global approach that is less dependent on the United States. Does France, does the Élysée Palace have the support of the rest of Europe for this? Is Europe going down this road of looking to be more independent? Or do you think that the transatlantic relationship will remain as important as it's ever been?
But you ask the question as if there was a contradiction. It is not the case. We want in France, like in all European countries, keep a very strong European transatlantic alliance between, in particular, between the European Union member states and the United States and all other NATO members. But on the other hand, we think that, and it is one of the main topics covered by our strategic discussions with the US right now, we think that to have a stronger European ally, to have a stronger, more capable European defense complementary to NATO is good for the US, is good news for the security of the US, because if you strengthen one pillar in an alliance, the European pillar, you strengthen the whole alliance. So we see things as going together.
Ambassador, it's Alex Steele in New York. Thank you for joining us. How does that work if Europe isn't aligned on all the issues? And I'm thinking specifically energy, whereas Germany is dependent on Russia for a lot of its gas. France gets some gas from Russia, but it's mostly really focused on nuclear, whereas you have Hungary blaming the EU Green Deal for the energy crisis. How do you guys fix that?
It is true that we have in the European Union different energy mixes. You have recalled our different positions towards nuclear energy, but we have a strong EU policy on climate transition. The European Union is a world leader in terms of reduction of emissions against the climate change. And so the European Union actually is through the years has developed, keeping some differences even in important domains between its member states. It has never, look, France and Germany, for instance, the European Union. I was ambassador in Berlin. I can tell you that the Franco-German cooperation, which is one of the foundations of the European integration, never meant that we always agreed on everything. On the contrary, it is because we take some different positions, then when we agree between France and Germany, it is a very strong cooperation which raises prospects for the whole of the European Union, because we can bring something valuable to the other European nations. And in the European Union, every country has a part in the decision, but every country comes with its own decisions, and then we find common decisions. This is really the basic element of the European integration, and it works also in energy in spite of our differences.
Speaking of energy, it's under this administration, the Biden administration, that they're now back in the Paris Climate Accord. We have COP26 coming up. We have the Iranian nuclear negotiations being discussed. How worried are you and your partners that potentially, if there's another election and it was to be someone like the former President Trump who wants to disengage on some of those at international stage, that you put all this effort in, then it goes to waste? How concerned is it to do all this work now? Are you preparing for potentially that swing in the U.S. politics?
First, when we Europeans in particular, we have kept the Paris Climate Agreement during the last 4 years alive and united the international community in spite of the withdrawal of the US, we have still benefited from the support of many US elements. Many cities, many governors, many businesses have continued to support the Paris Climate Agreement and goals. Second, we see every day the aggravation of the climate issues, more and more catastrophic weather events. Mm-hmm. So I think that the awareness of the effects of climate change has grown in such a way that it is really difficult. It will be more and more difficult to deny the necessity of acting very strongly. And third, we have now the new US administration. We have John Kerry with President Biden and the whole US government engaged very, very actively, and together with the European countries, they joined us in the fight, and they are very, very active. So I hope that we will create facts in implementing our goals, in stepping up our climate ambitions, each nation, which will make it anyway not possible to go backwards, because it would be so dramatic, so terrible for the whole world.
Ambassador, we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about security policy, we've talked about foreign policy, we've talked about the way we're going to progress the planet, hopefully with better sustainability goals. My question to you is, as you look to work in a more coordinated fashion with the new administration in Washington, what does that look like? President Macron said recently that he will judge President Biden not on his words, and you talked at the beginning about having lots of meetings and things are going to be progressing, but he said he would judge him not on words but on actions. Ambassador, what actions do you need to see from the United States to improve the relationship between the United States and France?
It is exactly what we are discussing now. The two presidents have decided already some very important principles about the importance of French and European action and presence in the Indo-Pacific. You know that France is an Indo-Pacific country. We have territories, we have populations, we have permanent armed forces in the Indian Ocean and in the Pacific Ocean. So this recognition by the US means that we will continue to work together and we will increase our cooperation because now even the EU has an Indo-Pacific strategy and it's the first field of common action and consultation. Then there is this debate, but which is now a very constructive discussion on the fact that a more capable European defense is something which is good for the US, for the alliance, complementary to NATO. And third, an element we didn't discuss now, but which is already in the statement, is that the US will reinforce its support to our fight and the fight of the Europeans against terrorism in Africa, in Sahel, alongside the African nations, the Sahelian nations, which is also something which is important, which is concrete. And it is important for our security. Again, it is not like all the rest, all the other points. It is not only good for the African countries to find security, sovereignty. It is not only good for the European neighbors of Africa. It's also good for the US to fight efficiently against Al-Qaeda, against ISIS, which remain a threat, a real threat.